Now, several regions will be cutting things fine before the National Elective Conference at the end of this year. UNISA Political Science Professor Dirk Kotze weighs in now. Professor Kotze, very good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time. The ANC's Northwest Conference is being postponed now for a third time, and unresolved branch disputes have been factors that have really been sore points for several of these conferences.
Yes, especially the provincial conferences. We've seen it in the past, before this round of elections. For example, the Eastern Cape one became quite infamous for that. But then also the one in Mpumalanga was delayed for some time. The one in the Eastern Cape was delayed in the beginning of it. Even at regional level, the eThekwini conference was also delayed because of the credential problems. So it has become a perennial issue. It is an issue almost at all these conferences, that the first part of the conference are taken up by debates about the acceptance of the credentials.
And we saw the retaliation, and in fact, perhaps it was an indication of what would transpire with the Northwest Conference when a group of disgruntled members took to Luthuli House on Friday to voice out their concerns, also speaking to how the battle lines have been drawn with the different factions at play.
Yes, the Northwest is particularly prone to these problems. It also goes back to the fact that the provincial government and the provincial executive was dissolved earlier on already, and that task teams and interim arrangements had to be made. So one of the big problems of the province is the fact that at the regional level, there's huge problems with about infighting within the ANC. Also the fact that most of their branches are not very active. And the very basis of the system of first establishing branches and branch delegates that go to the regions and from the regions to the provinces presumes that there must be an effective and functioning branches. And if the branches are not functioning effectively, then the whole provincial system actually collapses. And I think to a large extent this is one of the problems of the Northwest, is that the branches are very much dysfunctional. They are not audited properly, both the internal as well as external auditing that's normally taking place within the ANC. So they cannot elect delegates that can go to the next level, whether it's the regional or ultimately the provincial level. And therefore, the credentials of those who appear or arrive at these conferences are almost automatically challenged. By others who see them as maybe opponents in terms of the internal dynamics in the ANC. And that is where normally, and then it is what has been now done, and what you refer to now again, is that there's at national as well as provincial level, there are dispute resolution committees that have been established by the ANC specifically to prevent these things or preempt them from happening. And not always they are very effective. But in this case, I think it appears now that they first want to refer it to provincial dispute resolution committee to try to resolve the matters. But they don't always do that. So then it spills over into the provincial conference. And often, as we've seen in the past, the first part of the conference becomes then a very contested period about who are allowed to be delegates and can vote in these conferences.
And as you make mention of the credentials part of this conversation, we know that the IPC in the Northwest, the coordinator, Tlhomane Chauke, has already warned that what needs to be avoided in this conference is a credentials crisis. What are the other challenges that perhaps need to be looked at very closely ahead of this conference?
Well, that is the first point, is that they have gone through the proper procedures, which means that, first of all, the branches must have been audited. That means that they must have had their branch general meetings. They must have gone through a process of a proper election process of their delegates that will attend the regional conferences. Then the second step is that the regional conferences were properly constituted, that therefore laid the basis for the provincial conferences. So that's the very essence of it. These provincial conferences, to a large extent, have now become provinces about elections. They are supposed to deal also with the policy documents of the ANC. in preparation for the National Policy Conference at the end of July. But very often they don't have even time to deal with it because they are absolutely preoccupied with the election process. So that takes up most of the time, and that is also where these conferences either fail or succeed.
As we take a look at what transpired at the Limpopo conference, I mean, it was hailed as it was a smooth process, and it was a platform, said to be the platform for members to build on and learn from how it was run. What do you foresee as this conference being postponed in the Northwest for a third time and the possible outcome that it could present? I mean, we see how long these processes take and how many more clashes erupt during the conference.
Yes, I think it's almost set up for a very problematic, or to be a very problematic conference. The fact that they say it's only going to happen in August is in itself a problem because the ANC set a deadline of the end of July for all the provincial conferences. So I'm not sure how they are going to convince the national leadership of the ANC that they can go into August. Because, as I said, they must send their delegates also to the policy conference of the ANC, which is the last about 3 days of July. So if they have only their conference in August, then it means they won't be able to send delegates to the policy conference. So there's all sorts of effects that makes the situation for the Northwest very complicated.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time. Let's leave it there for now. Professor Dirk Kotze, political analyst, rounding up the Northwest ANC conference discussion following a third postponement of that conference.